Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about some of the different things in the SEC and some win totals to watch. Definitely some very, very interesting things. I think some are a little bit too high, some are a little bit too low, but most of them honestly are pretty much on the money for this upcoming season. But let's get into Cinderella Watch. This is something we'll likely do throughout this week. We'll go through every conference, give you guys an idea of teams that I'm watching that not only could maybe win that conference, but maybe just take the playoff by storm as well. And I have two for the SEC today. And it's a very interesting group of teams because, frankly, they're not necessarily teams that I think usually would find themselves in the dark horse Cinderella type group, but here they are. Let's start with A&M. I think this is a team that a lot of people, when they look at A&M right now, there's a lot of turnover. You know, a new coaching staff coming in with Mike Elko leading the way, a ton of roster turnover with guys like Walter Nolan, Jacoby Matthews finding their way out of the program. And I think a lot of people have just resigned themselves to the thought that A&M's an 8-4 team, A&M's a 9-3 team. They'll finish third or fourth or fifth in the conference, and that'll be that. But I think this team has a gear that I'm not sure that everyone is fully ready for this upcoming season. Now, do I think they're going to light people on fire or do anything absolutely insane? Not necessarily, but I think that guy right there, not Bryce Anderson, but Connor Wegman, the guy right before him, he's the key to this. And I think some people maybe underestimate who he is. I don't know what the going consensus of what this kid can be is, but from where I'm standing, he has every ability to be a top quarterback in this next year's draft. We've talked about how wide open this quarterback class is. We've talked about how there's no one really laying their claim to quarterback one, although I think Carson Beck is pretty comfortably in that position, but that's just a personal opinion. So I think Connor Wegman's a guy that absolutely has a ton to gain from this upcoming year. If he reaches his ceiling, and if this team does incredible things in the SEC, maybe goes to Atlanta, maybe goes to the playoff, who knows? This is a guy that's going to get a lot of talk, and it's because he has every single tool you could possibly want. He can throw the ball all over the field. Now, injuries have gotten in his way in the past, but there's a lot to like about this kid, and I think he's someone that opens them up in a way that they really haven't had in a really long time around A&M. He's from where I'm standing, the best quarterback they've had in quite some time from a talent perspective. Now, no disrespect to Kellen Mond, I would still put him ahead of him in terms of a talent perspective. So I think there's a lot of things to like about this team. I think there's a lot of things going in the right direction. And I think the biggest thing for me is Mike Elko coming in is super valuable. And I think one of the biggest things that when you're watching A&M over the last couple of years, whether it's the offseason and recruiting or it's on the field in the fall, it feels like there's not a lot of cohesion. There's not identity within that program, at least over the past couple of years. It felt like they were always changing things on the fly. It felt like they didn't have an idea of who they wanted to be and move forward with that steadfast, move forward without any question of that's the way that they want to go. That's not going to be the case under Mike Elko. I can almost promise you that. When that dude comes into a program, the number one thing he brings is identity. He brings toughness. He brings physicality. He brings the things that for so long A&M has needed in that program, and they just haven't had under the past regime. So it's something that I think is invaluable to this team, and I think could open them up to be a very dangerous team this upcoming season. This is one of the seasons in the past, however many, where people aren't coming in saying A&M is a team to really, really worry about. A&M is a team that could win a national title. It feels like a lot of that talk has subsided with some of the past years being the not so great. Let's just put it that way. Not being the years that they wanted to be by any means. And I think it opens a door for them to play that underdog status that I think is probably where they want to be. So it's one of those teams where you look around and they have a ton of motivation going into this year to buck a lot of the stereotypes that have surrounded A&M and Jimbo Fisher in the past couple of years and do a lot of the things that they haven't done in the past. And I think they're in a better position to do a lot of that stuff than some people think. On the offensive line, you have a guy like Cam Dewberry, who I think is going to be one of the best guards in the entire country this upcoming year. You have, guys like Shamar Stewart and Nick Scourton on that defensive line. The wide receiver group, I think, is really good. Noah Thomas is one of the most underrated players in the entire country, if you were to ask me. I think he's an NFL-level wide receiver. You also have guys like Moose Muhammad. You have Jade Walker. They're really, really good players in this back end, or in this wide receiver room, that can be difference makers as long as you keep that guy upright. As long as Connor Wegman can sit in that pocket and digest defenses, I think he can do really incredible things. So it's going to be fascinating to watch. I think Mike Elko brings an edge to this team that they absolutely need, an aggression to this team that they need. And I think A&M is a team that you need a certain level of prerequisite talent to get to the national title, to get to the playoff, and they have it. There's no two ways about that. So it'll be fascinating to watch if A&M can finally put it together, and if Mike Elko was really the last missing piece in that entire puzzle. But let's get into the other team here, and it's the Oklahoma Sooners, a team that is kind of funny because it feels like when we're going into this new era of the SEC, all of the talk is around Texas. And it was this weekend with a lot of really weird takes out there following the Lamborghini fiasco that was going on over there this weekend. But Oklahoma is a team that kind of has been overshadowed. And I think some of it is, Texas is just in a better position, has a better roster, a number of different things that go into that. But also, it's just kind of the way of the world. When teams come into a league and there's two teams coming in, or four teams coming in, there's always going to be one that gets more focus than the others. For the Big Ten, it's Oregon. For the Big 12, it's Colorado. So there's always going to be those teams that are pushed to the forefront, and one team or a couple of teams that are kind of in the shadows a little bit. Oklahoma feels like that team, and they have a ton of things in place. The offensive line is an area that I'm a little bit worried about. They brought in Branson Hickman from SMU, which I think is absolutely huge for them. But let's just work under the assumption that the offensive line is going to be at the very least okay this upcoming season. There's not a lot of other places on this team where you can poke a lot of holes. The wide receiver group, to me, is the most intriguing because not a lot of people put them in the Ohio State, Texas, Oregons of the world, but they're not far off. Let's be totally honest. Nick Anderson is, in my opinion, one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. Andrel Anthony adds a dynamic to that offense that is really, really fun to watch and definitely will be a huge part of that team this upcoming season. And then bringing in Deion Burks from Purdue is one of the biggest pickups they've had in this offseason. Definitely someone that has really wowed them through spring and into summer. So this wide receiver group is right up there with one of the best in the country, and Jackson Arnold is the guy that can, take them to the absolute next height, and his ceiling is ridiculously high. This kid could be dropped into an NFL quarterback room and no one would question it because of his size, because of his arm talent, because of all of the things that he brings to a football field. There would not be a lot of questions around him just standing in a NFL quarterback room. Now, he's got to unlock some things this upcoming year. There's no two ways about that. If they want to be the team that, makes a lot of noise in the SEC and possibly gets to the playoff and does some things that people aren't expecting of him, Jackson Arnold is the key. There's no two ways about that. But I think he has elite talent. I don't think there's any two ways about that. Now, the Arizona game did not go the way that he wanted it to by any means, but now he's the guy, and he has been the guy the entire offseason, and it's definitely a huge thing when you're going into the SEC to have someone that is out front. He's going to be the guy that, asserts the dominance, that is the leader, that does a lot of the things that you need him to do. So I think he's in a great position. I think the defensive line is another spot where you worry a little bit, but Dominic Williams was an absolutely huge pickup there. I think Dejon Terry is a great duo with him. So I think as long as they don't have big-time injury trouble there, they should be more than okay. The edge rushing with Ethan Downs and Trace Ford, I think, is going to be more than good. Danny Stutzman in the middle of that defense is one of the best linebackers in the entire country. So there's a lot of things to like about this team. The back end of this defense returns tons of experience, tons of guys that can match up with some of the offensive firepower that they're going to have to go up against. Woody Washington, Billy Bowman are going to have to be huge for this team to do what they want to do this upcoming year. So there's a lot of things going right for Oklahoma. It's been a steady climb since Brent Venables came into the door, and I have full faith that he's going to be able to make it work in the SEC. Now, it could be a little bit of a rough landing. I think that's always in the cards for someone that is struggling on the offensive line and the defensive line the way Oklahoma is, but there's a reality where they coach them up, and a lot of these kids come out and play really, really good football and do some things that, we're not necessarily expecting them to do. So it'll be fascinating to watch. Both those teams, I think, have a chance to really shock the world and make sure it's known that they're not just, in the SEC to collect a paycheck and hang out. And Oklahoma, especially, is not here to be second fiddle to Texas by any means. So it'll be fascinating to watch that. The SEC is a very interesting conference. And frankly, there were a couple other teams like Kentucky and Auburn that I absolutely could have dropped in here. But I feel like OU and Texas A&M have just a little bit more of that talent level that I'm looking for when I'm, looking for that possible Cinderella team. So it'll be fascinating to watch that unfold. We will definitely get to the Big Ten tomorrow with some very, very interesting teams out there. But for now, we'll take our final break, and when we come back, we have a little bit of a new segment for y'all. We're gonna do Monday questions. This is likely something we'll do pretty much every Monday, but we'll break down everything for it right after this. So stick with us.